All names have been changed for privacy. This is my story, and I know I'll be judged. But I need to tell it from my side. My name is Clara, I'm 35 years old, and until very recently, I was married to Ethan, 38. We were together for over a decade. 10 years of shared dinners, shared bills, and shared dreams that slowly, almost invisibly, turned into shared silence. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. Stable, comfortable, a little boring maybe, but solid. People envied us, said we were goals. What they didn't see was the emptiness I felt every day. The little ways love had disappeared, replaced with routines, reminders, and calendar entries. We had stopped touching each other, stopped surprising each other. I became the wife, and he became the provider. We functioned like colleagues who happened to share a mortgage. And so when our 10th anniversary trip came up, Ethan was ecstatic. He thought it was going to be some kind of rekindling, a renewal of vows without the ceremony. I could see the excitement in his face as he booked a 5-star resort with ocean views, private pools, wine lists so long they had to be carried on their own chair. He wanted magic, but I already knew that no matter how expensive the setting, I couldn't summon the magic back. Because I wasn't in love with him anymore. And, truthfully, I'd already found someone else. His name was Adrian, an artist I'd met at a gallery opening a few months earlier. He was nothing like Ethan. Where Ethan was practical, Adrian was emotional. Where Ethan talked about budgets and work schedules, Adrian talked about souls and inspiration. He saw me, not as a wife or as a manager of responsibilities, but as a woman. At least, that's how it felt. Every time he sketched, every time he touched my hand with paint-stained fingers, I felt alive again. I know how it sounds. I know people will say it was selfish, reckless, cruel. And maybe it was. But after years of feeling invisible, ignored, and trapped in a role I didn't choose, I wanted to breathe again. That's why, on the night of our anniversary dinner, while we sat in an elegant restaurant, the kind with a string quartet and food plated like art, I told him the truth. I put my fork down carefully, my heart hammering. I looked at Ethan across the candlelit table, his eyes glowing with expectation, and I said the words I had been rehearsing for weeks. Ethan, I need to be honest. This isn't working for me anymore. I want a divorce. I expected an explosion. Anger. A fight. Something loud and dramatic. But instead, he just froze, like I had cut the world in half. I could see the confusion, the disbelief in his eyes. He croaked out a single question. Is there someone else? I almost lied. I almost said no. But I didn't want to start this new chapter of my life with another lie. So I admitted it. Yes, there was someone. Adrian. Someone who saw me, who understood me. Ethan's face hardened, but he didn't shout. He didn't throw his glass or storm away. He just stared at me. And then he said the one thing I never expected. Why wait? Let's start the divorce now. I blinked at him. What? He stood up, calm as ice, pulled out his wallet, and left enough money on the table to cover his dinner and wine. He didn't even pay for mine. Then he looked at me, gave this small, tight smile, and walked out. That was not the script I had prepared for. I thought there would be tears, arguments, maybe even pleading. Instead, there was just cold finality. It rattled me more than if he'd screamed. Back at the suite, I sat there waiting, expecting him to return so we could at least talk. But when I got back, the room was half empty. His suitcase was gone. Mine was still neatly in the closet. Then I saw the note from the hotel desk slipped under the door. Your husband is checked out. The remaining charges will be split between the two of you. At first, I didn't understand. But when I went downstairs, reality slapped me across the face. Ethan had canceled his part of the booking, paid his half, and left me responsible for the rest. The plunge pool, the overpriced meals, the spa sessions, suddenly, all of it was on me. I tried to check out the next morning, but the front desk refused to release my luggage until I cleared the outstanding charges. Thousands of dollars, all charged to the room. My card declined. Panic set in. I felt trapped, humiliated, desperate. That's when I called my mom. Clara, what happened? she asked when I sobbed into the phone. Ethan left. He just left me here, Mom. The hotel won't let me leave until I pay the bill. She was furious. Not at me, of course, but at Ethan. She said she'd call him, demand that he make it right. But when she did, he didn't budge. He told her coldly that I was on my own, that my bills were now mine to handle. He even had the audacity to suggest I call Adrian for help. The humiliation of that moment still makes me sick. Because that's exactly what I had to do. I called Adrian, my lover, my supposed soulmate. And he did send money, enough for the hotel and a last-minute flight home. But it wasn't romantic. It wasn't supportive. It was transactional. I had to beg. And when I finally landed back home, economy class, squeezed between crying babies and snoring men, I realized how far I had already fallen. This wasn't freedom yet. This wasn't the new life I imagined. This was the messy, ugly consequence of walking away. And it was only the beginning. First update. When I got back home from that disastrous anniversary trip, I thought things would calm down. I thought Ethan would eventually text, maybe want to talk, maybe at least try to negotiate like two adults. After all, 10 years of marriage doesn't just dissolve over one dinner. But Ethan was silent. Completely silent. I tried calling him, blocked. I emailed him, no response. The only people who answered me were his absence and his cold refusal. And then came my mother, Lucy, fuming on the phone. Clara, he abandoned you. He left you at that hotel like trash. How dare he? For once, she wasn't exaggerating. That's exactly how it felt, discarded. But Ethan had already made his stance crystal clear. He was done. I should have felt free. I should have felt like I'd finally cut the chains that had bound me to a life I didn't want anymore. Instead, I felt cornered, like the whole world was looking at me with suspicion. Because soon, the calls started pouring in, not just from my mother, but from friends, acquaintances, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Clara, what happened? Ethan's devastated. How could you? Is it true you cheated on him? On your anniversary? Word travels fast. And apparently, Ethan didn't even have to say much. Everyone pieced together the story in their own way, and surprise, surprise, they painted him as the heartbroken husband and me as the selfish traitor. Maybe I was selfish. But no one seemed to care about why. No one asked me what it was like living with a man who treated intimacy like an item on a checklist. No one asked about the years I spent trying to feel alive again while Ethan buried himself in work. Instead, I was the villain. And the worst part? Ethan didn't even play into it. He didn't rant, didn't spread lies, didn't post cryptic statuses. His silence was louder than any accusation. It made me look guilty without him even lifting a finger. That silence got under my skin. I cracked one night and sent him an email, pages long. I told him he had been cruel to leave me stranded, cruel to use money as a weapon against me. I reminded him of everything I'd sacrificed, my career, my independence, my youth. And I demanded at least some kind of fairness. Reimbursement for the hotel, help with the flight, something. His reply? Nothing. Not a word. But I know him. He's an accountant, meticulous, always keeping tabs. So when I later found out that he'd been going through our financial history, combing through every card statement and every charge I'd ever made, I realized with horror what he was building. He wasn't ignoring me. He was preparing. Still, I tried to live my life. I leaned on Adrian. He was sweet at first, supportive in his poetic, slightly impractical way. He said things like, "This is just the storm before the sunrise," and "We're rewriting your story, Clara." Lovely words, yes, but not much use when bills kept piling up. And yet, I clung to him. Because even when his help felt conditional, even when he seemed overwhelmed by my drama, he was still a warm body who looked at me like I was worth something. Ethan never looked at me like that anymore. Weeks passed, and I tried to gather my belongings from the house. Ethan wouldn't let me in. He insisted everything had to go through his lawyer. His lawyer. He couldn't even face me himself. One afternoon, Adrian and I decided to go anyway. We showed up at the house, thinking maybe Ethan would soften if he saw me in person. I was nervous but hopeful. Surely, he wouldn't just shut the door in my face. He didn't. He didn't even open it. Instead, he spoke through the intercom, his voice flat, robotic. "Clara, you're not welcome here unannounced. If you want your things, go through my lawyer." I lost it. I shouted, I begged, I reminded him my whole life was still inside that house, my clothes, my art, everything. But he just threatened to call the police if we didn't leave. And he wasn't bluffing. When I lingered, he picked up the phone in clear view of the security camera. Panic surged through me, and Adrian pulled me away before we could make an even bigger scene. Driving away in silence, humiliation burned through me. How had it come to this? 10 years of marriage, reduced to me being treated like a trespasser outside my own home. But things got worse. Much worse. A few days later, I got another call from my mother. Her voice was sharp, trembling with barely concealed rage. "Clara, do you know what Ethan's lawyer uncovered?" I didn't. Not yet. She told me, the lease. Apparently, the studio Ethan had been paying for, the one he thought was my personal creative sanctuary, wasn't just mine anymore. Last year, Adrian and I had signed a new lease agreement together. We registered it as Hall Gallery, his name, not mine. It wasn't supposed to be sinister. I thought Ethan wouldn't care as long as I was pursuing my passion. But in Ethan's eyes, it wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. And maybe he was right. He had been paying every month thousands of dollars, thinking it was for me. But in reality, Adrian and I had turned it into our shared gallery. Ethan was unknowingly financing not just my art, but our life together. The moment I heard the word fraud, my stomach dropped. Because this wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. This was legal. This was dangerous. Ethan wasn't just divorcing me. He was planning to sue me and Adrian too. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt true fear. Second update. Fear. That's the only word I can use to describe the days after my mother told me what Ethan's lawyer had discovered. I had always known Ethan was meticulous, but I underestimated just how dangerous that could be when his precision turned against me. He had spreadsheets. He had receipts. He had proof that I hadn't just betrayed him emotionally. I had used his money to finance a gallery with Adrian. Adrian tried to soothe me. "It's just paperwork, Clara. They can't really do anything. You'll get half of everything anyway. That's the law." But deep down, I knew he was wrong. Because Ethan wasn't an ordinary man anymore. He was cold, methodical, and frighteningly calm. He wasn't acting out of emotion. He was building a case. And I was the target. Weeks later, I found myself sitting in a sterile conference room, facing Ethan for the first time since the resort. Between us sat a long mahogany table. On his side, his lawyer, a man named Richard Cole, who radiated the kind of quiet menace that made my stomach twist. On my side, Adrian sat with me, along with the lawyer I'd scrambled to hire at the last minute. I barely recognized Ethan when he walked in. He looked thinner, sharper, almost like he'd been sculpted by his anger. But it wasn't wild anger, it was control. He didn't look at me like a lover or even an enemy. He looked at me like a project he had already finished, boxed, and filed away. My lawyer began by outlining what we wanted: a fair 50-50 split of the house, alimony for 5 years since I had sacrificed my career, and the continuation of support for the gallery lease until I could get back on my feet. I thought it was reasonable. After all, I had given him 10 years of my life. I had been there when he built his career, when he climbed the ladder. I deserved stability, didn't I? Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't even look at me. Instead, Richard slid a binder across the table. Thick, heavy, tabbed with color-coded sections. "This," Richard said calmly, "is our evidence." The first page nearly made my heart stop. A photograph of me and Adrian on a balcony at a hotel, laughing, holding wine glasses, captioned, "Birthday Weekend Bliss," from Adrian's social media. The same weekend I had told Ethan I was away on a silent retreat. Page after page followed. Credit card statements showing dinners, hotel stays, lingerie purchases, PayPal transfers, all tied to Adrian. Every charge I had told Ethan was for the studio was right there, staring back at me, recategorized as what it really was: expenses for an affair. Adrian's knee bounced under the table, his face tightening with every new receipt. My throat burned with humiliation. But then came the final blow. Richard produced a copy of the new lease agreement.
Hall Gallery.
Signed by both me and Adrian. All while Ethan's bank account auto-paid the rent. The number Richard announced was devastating: $83,450. That was the amount they claimed had been fraudulently diverted from Ethan to fund our so-called gallery. It wasn't just infidelity anymore. It was theft. I tried to speak, to explain. It wasn't fraud, it was support. Ethan knew I needed that space, he gave it to me willingly. The gallery was just a progression of that dream. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew how weak they sounded. Ethan finally looked at me then, and his voice was calm, almost eerily so. You didn't just betray me, Clara. You built your future on my money. You lied every time you swiped that card. This isn't about a broken marriage anymore. This is about consequences. Richard then laid down their settlement offer. I would get nothing. No alimony. No share of the house. Just my personal belongings and the mountain of debt I had created. In exchange, Ethan would drop the civil fraud case. It was like being told I could choose between drowning slowly or being thrown off a cliff. My lawyer whispered frantically in my ear, "They'll bury you in court. If this goes to trial, they'll win. Take the deal." I looked at Adrian, hoping for some sign of solidarity, some reassurance that we'd weather this together. But the look on his face chilled me. His arrogance was gone. His artist's detachment was gone. He looked scared. And worse, angry at me. As if I had dragged him into something he hadn't signed up for. Tears filled my eyes unbidden, hot and humiliating. I tried to hold them back, but my whole body shook as the realization sank in. I had lost. I turned to Ethan, my voice breaking. Please, you can't do this to me. 10 years, we had 10 years together. Don't erase it like it meant nothing. He didn't even blink. His reply was quiet, sharp, final. I'm not doing anything. You did this. These are the consequences of your choices. That was the moment I knew it was over.
We signed.
We took the deal. Because there was no other option. I walked out of that building feeling hollow, like the floor had been ripped out from under me. My marriage was gone. My reputation in shreds. And now, even the financial safety net I had counted on had evaporated. And Ethan? He walked away without a scratch. I thought the nightmare was over after that. But I was wrong. That was only the beginning of the collapse. Final update. After that mediation day, I told myself things couldn't get any worse. We had signed the deal. I thought at the very least I could walk away with dignity, start over, rebuild my life. But I was wrong. The consequences didn't end in that conference room. They followed me home, grew taller, louder, heavier. First, I had to leave the house. The place I'd lived in for years, decorated, filled with memories, it was gone. Ethan sold it.
Just like that.
No hesitation. He didn't even give me a chance to argue. My belongings were delivered in boxes, dropped like packages on my parents' porch. So I moved back in with them. At 35. In my old room. The one with the faded wallpaper and a squeaky bed frame. It was humiliating. I went from calling myself a gallery director to being a divorced woman hiding from neighbors' whispers, living under my mother's critical gaze. Adrian tried to stick around at first. He'd visit, talk about new beginnings and artistic rebirth.
But I saw the shift in him.
He wasn't the dreamy, passionate lover anymore. He was impatient, restless. My drama weighed on him. My debt, my tears, my ruined reputation. It was all too heavy for his fragile, romantic soul. Within weeks, he was gone. Moved to another city. Left behind a few canvases and a scarf I still can't look at without choking on shame. He didn't even break up properly. Just faded, like smoke. The gallery? It folded. Of course it did. Turns out, you can't run a business when your main investor, my ex-husband, cuts you off and files a fraud case. The landlord is still pursuing us for the lease. Only now, with Adrian gone, all the pressure fell on me. Debt collectors called. Credit card companies sent letters. Every day felt like another reminder of how badly I had miscalculated. My mother tried to defend me at first. She'd call Ethan, leave long, furious voicemails. But even she eventually grew quiet, her tone shifting from outrage to disappointment. I could hear it in her sighs, the way she avoided looking at me when she thought I wasn't watching.
And Ethan?
He never spoke to me again. Not once. Not a single word beyond the legal proceedings. He didn't rage. He didn't mock. He didn't even acknowledge me. His silence was absolute, unbreakable, and somehow that hurt more than any cruel word could have. I started hearing stories, though, through friends, through whispers, that he'd sold the house, bought a sleek apartment downtown, that he'd cleared the binder, deleted the spreadsheets, even popped champagne to celebrate being free of me, that he had invested the money he saved from not paying alimony, not splitting assets, not funding Hall Gallery, that he was thriving. And me? I was stuck in the wreckage. I tried to tell myself I wasn't the villain, that I had only wanted to feel alive again, to be seen, that Ethan's coldness had pushed me away, that Adrian's promises had blinded me. But at night, lying in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't escape the truth. I had done this. I had gambled 10 years of marriage for fleeting passion and a fantasy of freedom, and I had lost. The silence in that house, the way my parents walked on eggshells around me, the pitying looks from relatives, it all screamed the same thing. I had no one to blame but myself. Sometimes I think back to that night at the resort, to Ethan sitting across from me, cologne lingering in the air, his eyes filled with hope. I remember how steady his voice was when he said, "Why wait? Let's start now." He had already let go in that moment, and I hadn't even realized it. Now, months later, he's gone. Not just physically, but from my life, my future, my story. And I'm left with nothing but the echo of my choices. I thought Adrian would save me. I thought freedom would taste sweet. Instead, it tastes like ashes. Maybe someday I'll rebuild. Maybe someday I'll paint again, laugh again, live again. But not today. Today, I sit in my parents' kitchen, scrolling through debt notices on my phone, while Ethan climbs higher, free of me. And I finally understand what he meant when he said, "These are the consequences of your choices." Because they are. And they're mine to live with.